Hey everyone, good morning, good evening, or whatever time it is while you're watching this video. Welcome. Today, we're diving into a summary of movie Life of Chuck. The film, based on a short story by Stephen King, begins with the third act titled, Thank You, Chuck. Middle school teacher Marty is in the middle of class when a fire truck speeds past the window. A student mentions that the news is reporting a massive earthquake in California. An entire section of coastline has just collapsed into the ocean. Marty and the others try to verify this, but the internet suddenly goes down. The connection doesn't return. Over time, parents become more concerned about the loss of internet than their kids' academic performance. Reports of disasters come in from all over the world: earthquakes, floods, tsunamis, wildfires, and even a second season of The Last of Us. While sitting in traffic, contemplating all these tragic events, Marty spots a billboard for an accountant. It reads, Charles Krantz, 39 great years. Thank you, Chuck. The story shifts to Felicia, Marty's ex-wife, who works at a hospital. Her years watching Doctor Who finally come in handy. Felicia is growing increasingly distressed. Patients are dying, and she and her colleagues are powerless to stop it. Overwhelmed, she calls Marty one evening just to talk. She confides her fear that the world is ending, and all these strange events are just symptoms of the collapse. During their conversation, Marty, trying to remain calm, brings up a thought experiment involving the cosmic calendar. He explains, if the Big Bang happened at midnight on January 1st, then the entire history of humanity would fit into the last 14 seconds of December 31st. After this brief science lesson, Marty turns back to his TV. But suddenly, the broadcast cuts out. Every channel displays a color test pattern, interrupted only by a simple message, Thank you, Chuck. The next morning, as Marty gets ready for work, he runs into his neighbor Gus, who warns him about a massive traffic jam up ahead. Apparently, the very road Marty drove down the day before has collapsed into the earth. Shaken by how close he came to being swallowed by the disaster, Marty remembers the billboard with the accountant's face. He sees a bank employee nearby, the same bank where the billboard was placed, and asks her about Chuck. But she's confused. She doesn't know anyone named Chuck who works there, and she has no idea who the thank you messages are meant for. As Marty and Gus continue to discuss the unraveling world, they look up and spot a plane writing words in the sky. Thank you, Chuck. Meanwhile, Felicia heads to work, passing a wall covered in graffiti, all of it in tribute to Chuck. But Felicia is in for a surprise. She rushed to the hospital for nothing. The place is completely deserted. Only her colleague remains. All the patients have vanished. The rest of the staff? Gone too. There's simply no one left to care for. Meanwhile, Marty tries to call Felicia, but now cell service is completely down, so he decides to head to her place on foot. On the way, he meets an elderly man named Sam. They talk about the strange Chuck phenomenon that seems to be taking over everything. As it turns out, they're both headed toward the same neighborhood, so they walk together. Sam shares a bit about his life. He owns a funeral home, though he always dreamed of being a weatherman, delivering forecasts on TV. He then brings up an unsettling fact. A day isn't exactly 24 hours, he says. It's actually a little shorter. Leap years make up the difference. But lately, the days have been growing even shorter. The Earth's rotation is slowing down. Marty thanks him and parts ways, hurrying to reach Felicia's house before nightfall. As darkness settles, he runs into a young girl on roller skates, Felicia's neighbor. While they chat, the streetlights suddenly go out, one by one. The electricity is gone, just like the radio waves and internet. But something much more disturbing happens. In the windows of nearby homes, a cold blue light flickers on. Portraits of Chuck, glowing ghost-like, appear with words of gratitude beneath each one. Thank you, Chuck. Marty tells the girl to get home to her parents, then continues on to Felicia's. Despite the divorce, Felicia is genuinely happy to see him. Facing the end of the world alone is terrifying. Together, they step into the backyard, holding hands as they gaze up at the starry sky. The universe is peaceful for a moment, until one star winks out, then another, and another. Felicia says she's scared. Marty nods quietly. He's scared too. And then, without warning, every star in the sky vanishes. Total, impenetrable darkness floods the world. At that exact moment, in a quiet hospital room, Chuck Krantz dies. He's just 39. Beside him are his wife and son. She leans over, voice trembling, and whispers, These were wonderful 39 years. Thank you, Chuck. And with his final breath, an entire universe ends. So concludes Act 3. The second act is called Street Performers, and it begins 9 months earlier. Chuck is just an ordinary accountant on a business trip to attend a conference. During a break, he takes a walk through the city and comes across a young street drummer, Taylor, tapping out a rhythm on a set of overturned buckets. She plays with joy, with energy, hoping for tips from passing strangers. Most people walk by, but not Chuck. He stops, sets down his briefcase, and begins to move in time with the beat. Taylor notices and shifts her rhythm slightly, adjusting to his tempo, inviting him in. Their improvised performance catches attention. A small crowd begins to gather, including Janice, a woman recently dumped by her boyfriend, via text message. Drawn in by the music and the surprising confidence of a man dancing in a business suit, she smiles. Then she starts dancing too. Chuck sees her, extends a hand, and invites her into the spotlight. She takes it. The two of them begin dancing together at the center of the crowd. Two strangers, completely immersed in the rhythm, caught in something pure and spontaneous. Even when Chuck suddenly clutches his head from a sharp, brief headache, he doesn't doesn't stop. The rhythm carries them, laughter echoes, the circle tightens, and for one beautiful moment, the city forgets itself. After taking a bow, the dancers help Taylor load her drums into her colleague's van. Then they all head to the waterfront, where the drummer honestly splits the money 3 ways. But when she asks Chuck why he stopped and started dancing in the first place, he can't give her an answer. He doesn't know why he did it. Even he doesn't understand. Once Taylor leaves, Chuck walks Janice home. First, because it's polite. Second, because his hotel is in the same neighborhood anyway. As she walks away, he glances over and, for a split second, spots a girl on roller skates, the same neighbor Felicia will live next to in the future. As Chuck makes his way to the hotel, he has no idea that in just 9 months, as he lies dying from brain cancer, he'll recall this exact moment, and in the rare silences between unbearable waves of pain, he'll think that maybe his entire life existed just for this one street dance. And with that memory, the story returns to Act 1, I Contain Multitudes. Chuck is 7 years old when his parents are killed in a car crash. The boy is taken in by his grandparents, Sarah and Albie, his father's parents. In the beginning, the house is filled with a heavy, sorrowful silence. The old couple are devastated by the loss of their son, their pregnant daughter-in-law, and the unborn granddaughter they never got to meet. Years pass. The grief softens just enough to let the light back in. Slowly, the home becomes warmer. Grandma Sarah starts dancing in the kitchen, swaying to music as she cooks. She teaches young Chuck to feel rhythm, to move with music, and to love it. She introduces him to a stack of old musicals recorded on VHS tapes, each one bursting with color, choreography, and joy. That's where he learns his first steps, and discovers that life, no matter how tragic, can still make room for a little dance. Aside from everything else, the boy was deeply curious about the locked door at the top of the stairs, which led to a small tower room. His grandfather strictly forbade him from going up there and always kept the key with him. Chuck had no idea why it was off limits. One evening, while they were watching a documentary about the cosmic calendar, Albie, after drinking a little too much, was hit by what he jokingly called his Tatooine flashbacks. Loosened by alcohol, the old man told Chuck that the Victorian-style tower had been built long ago, and the house was added to it much later. And in the room at the top of that tower, spirits lived, ghosts that could predict when people would die. Albie swore he'd seen dead people up there more than once, including a neighborhood boy, shortly before the boy passed away. Just then, Grandma Sarah came home and cut his story short, but Chuck's curiosity had already been sparked. He asked Sarah what happened to that boy. Realizing that her husband had been at it again, she sent Albie out to the store to get some fresh air, pick up a loaf of bread, and, if possible, secure the title of Sea Queen. Then she gently explained to Chuck that there were no ghosts. Grandpa had simply been drunk and telling stories again, including the one about the neighbor boy who was tragically hit by a car. But Chuck wasn't satisfied. Going full Little Red Riding Hood mode, he later volunteered to bring some pastries to their neighbor, a veteran of the Freddy Krueger Wars, as they joked. Relying on the charm and cleverness of a 10-year-old, Chuck gently coaxed the neighbor into telling him what she knew about the ghost his grandfather claimed to have seen in the tower. A man had hanged himself after his wife left him for another man. 20 years of marriage, gone in an instant. On the final day of 6th grade, Chuck's literature teacher reads the class a classic Walt Whitman poem, Song of Myself. While the rest of the students couldn't care less about poetry, one line strikes Chuck deep in the heart. I contain multitudes. After class, he walks up to the teacher and asks what it means. She gently places her hands on his head and says, between my hands, there's a whole universe. Everything you've seen, heard, and learned, it's all stored inside your head, and that universe will keep growing as you experience more in life. But Chuck, ever the curious thinker, immediately asks, what happens to that universe when I die? The teacher smiles and advises him not to clutter his young mind with such dark thoughts, not right before summer vacation. Chuck walks out of school, briefly locking eyes with Marty from the neighboring class. But there's no joy to be had in the break ahead. Grandma Sarah passes away. After the funeral, weighed down by grief and endless thoughts, Chuck visits the store where she had collapsed and died. He asks the girl working the register to show him the spot where his grandmother fell, and she does. Chuck becomes obsessed with death. Remembering his grandfather's stories about spirits, he decides to sneak into the tower room, believing he might find answers. He steals the keys, waiting for the right moment. Albie, drowning his sorrow in alcohol, is worn out, and eventually drifts into a heavy sleep. But just as the boy opens the door, his ever-watchful grandfather appears out of nowhere. Pushing Chuck aside, the old man freezes at the doorway, staring into the room at something only he can see. Then, without a word about what he saw, Albie takes the keys and, oddly calm, apologizes for pushing Chuck down the stairs. He repeats that the room is off limits, no matter what. That fall, Chuck returns to school and signs up for the dance club. Not only is it full of girls and only 3 boys, but Chuck quickly becomes the best dancer in the group, a clear echo of the lessons Grandma once shared. His ability to nail the moonwalk amazes both classmates and the instructor. After one session, a girl named Kat invites Chuck to perform a duet. He hesitates. She's a full head taller, and he feels ridiculous next to her. But Kat comes up with a solution. She brings him a pair of heels to balance the height. They're too big, so Chuck stuffs them with toilet paper. Later, he tells his grandfather about the upcoming performance. Albie isn't thrilled. Instead, he gives Chuck a stern lecture about how dancing is fine, but real life demands something practical, something that puts food on the table. Albie works as an accountant, and he wants to pass that legacy on, a love for numbers. But Chuck counters that numbers are boring. And that's when the old man delivers a passionate monologue about math, how it's the key to understanding the universe, from how many minutes are in a day to how stars are made. The only thing math can't do is lie, nor can it explain why, if stars are at war, they'd fight in such a strange order. First 4, 5, 6, then 1, 2, 3, and only after 7, 8, 9. Mystical, no doubt. Confused about his path in life at such a young age, Chuck is lost in a fog of self-doubt. He bails on the dance with Kat, claiming he's not feeling well. The excuse hurts her. Disappointed, she walks away. His dance teacher, noticing the hesitation, gently tells him that he doesn't have to do what he doesn't want to. But lying isn't the only way out. Chuck steps outside to clear his head. He looks up at the stars, breathes in the cool air, and makes a decision. He'll dance. Not for the crowd, not for Kat, but for himself. Bursting back into the hall, he walks up to Kat and asks her to dance. And then they move, graceful, electric, alive, as the crowd of classmates forms a circle around them, cheering. Years later, Chuck will unknowingly repeat these same moves in a street performance, an echo of this joyful childhood memory, a dance that marks the happiest moment of his youth. As the performance ends, the crowd erupts in applause, and Kat, smiling, leans in for their first gentle kiss. Even Marty, passing by, tosses him a rare compliment. Overwhelmed with emotion, Chuck slips outside to breathe. He walks across the football field, spinning and moving beneath the stars, his heart nearly bursting. In a sudden spin, his hand brushes against a chain-link fence and slices open on a sharp edge. That scar would stay with him for the rest of his life. 6 years later, Albie dies of a heart attack. The old man leaves Chuck not only the house, but also enough savings to cover college. At the funeral, Sam, the funeral director who once dreamed of being a weatherman, tells Chuck that Albie had everything perfectly arranged before he passed. He believes the old man knew. There was something in his eyes, a calm acceptance. Since Chuck is still underage, his maternal grandparents move into the house to watch over him until he heads off to college. But just before they arrive, after Albie's funeral, Chuck receives a set of keys among the man's belongings, and at last, he knows it's time. Time to unlock the mystery of the tower. He climbs the stairs, heart pounding, and inserts the key. The door creaks open to reveal an empty attic room. Just one window, nothing more. Chuck's shoulders sag with disappointment, but then, as he turns to leave, he sees it. A dying man, lying on a bed, wrinkled, pale, his hand limp at his side. There's a scar on the back of that hand, Chuck's scar, and suddenly, he understands. This is his death, his future, what his grandfather saw when he spoke of ghosts. He saw Sarah's death, he saw his own. That's what haunted him. Not spirits, but inevitability. Now it's Chuck's burden, to wait, just like Albie did, to wonder how many years the man in the bed had left. But when the vision fades, Chuck doesn't run, he doesn't cry, he makes a choice. He won't let that moment define his life. He won't live in fear of a future carved in stone. He'll live fully, boldly, without looking back, and that's where the film ends.